I just wanted to run that by the committee and see how they feel about that.
Right, I
Currently,
think-
there are I believe there are 9 voting members, Kathy?
Yes, we do have a policy
Yeah.
in the school committee policy manual, so the school committee subcommittee the policy subcommittee will be coming together in the near future to take a look at amending that.
We'd kind of like to fast track it to
Does
see.
it restrict the number of voters
Yes,
you
it
can have?
does.
Yeah.
It does.
There
Yeah.
are several policies in the manual that speak to the membership, so we need to take a look at those and
Okay.
revise.
Just seems to me that it should be at the voting member should be at the will of the subcommittee. I mean, of the school
Yeah.
committee, that we
Yeah.
determine, but committee by committee, we could.
Well, we do have a policy, and it has to be a joint appointment, Val, too, because
Right.
all the
Oh, so all the voting members
would
have to- so
a-
we'd
would
have to have
a
the
joint
selectmen-
mem- Right.
Yes.
Right.
But we
Now
have
it-
to have 2 readings on this policy,
Right.
so.
And here's another question. Would we have to open up opportunities to others because we are now reappointing them as voting members, or could we just reappoint the existing associate members?
Well, reappoint the associate members as voting members.
I'm just wondering. I don't know if we open
There's
up
no
the procedure.
language that, in the policies, I've read them,
Okay.
that talks about a process regarding who accesses membership.
Okay, so
We always entertain anybody that wants to apply to come on the committee. I
Yeah.
mean, we'd certainly take a look at it, and if we feel the committees should be set at the number of members we have, certainly would keep them in mind if somebody left, because it's a
Okay.
big committee, but
It's a very big committee.
It's a big committee, but it seems to be working
It is.
well, and the
It's-
people putting in so much time and effort.
Yeah.
I think we had 100% attendance at the last meeting, and it was 18 or 19 members.
I think it was.
Yeah.
And we also had, I think, a unanimous vote, so,
Yeah.
it's not, obviously not too big.
But things get a little bit more complicated as you move through the.
Certainly.
Yeah.
But I would
process.
say I've attended the last 2 meetings just to observe, and because obviously I'm interested in this project, and for having as many members, the committee functions really well.
Yeah.
Yes, they-
Everybody's informed,
Yeah.
and everybody participates, and
Mhm.
it's a really good group. So.
Yeah, it's an excellent group, and they put in an awful lot of time. Some of these people have been on this committee for 5 years. So I think even as associate members, so I think they deserve a voting status.
So we'll leave that up to the policy subcommittee
Right.
to make those changes.
We'll be bringing that forward to you as soon as we meet.
Okay, great. Any questions? Okay, next, we have the initial presentation of the fiscal year 2012 budget. I will say that this year, I think the last few years, we've been a little bit earlier, and I think this year we at least have the governor's budget to go on in terms of Chapter 70 and other local aid. So that's a little more helpful. So we have a little better idea, I believe, what type of revenues we're working with. And then I'll let Carl get into the details, and then we can all ask questions and comment as we go along. And first, thanks Carl and Kathy and everybody else. Obviously, a lot of work goes in and the administrative staff, a lot of work goes into putting this together. And there's a lot of good documents in here, revolving funds. I found that very helpful. And Carl had a great summary also of the budget, so.
On the governor's budget, Bob Mosseri and I attended the Suburban Coalition meeting on Thursday night.
Mhm.
And we heard that, at that meeting, that revenues are running at something like $1 to $1.2 billion ahead
Right.
of projection.
Right.
That's at least in the right direction.
Yep. Carl?
Thank you. First of all, it's my pleasure to present this preliminary budget on behalf of Superintendent Willis and Administrative Council. I'd like to let the audience know that we will be posting all of the detailed budget on the website tomorrow morning, so
Great.
People can avail themselves of that. We're hoping to improve our website this spring to provide more timely information and help us as we go through this budget continuum. Also mention that there are some paper copies of the budget on the table there for anyone to take if you're so inclined. I'd like to begin by describing the information that's on the inner flap of your budgets. There is some important information there that I'd like to just briefly go over. To begin with, there is a letter from the superintendent that provides an excellent context for the budget document. That's the first page. It's followed by 3 pages of information. The first 2 pages represent information that was developed during the strategic planning process back in about 8 to 9 years ago at this point. And I know we're in the very, very early stages of looking at that, but we've included that information in your packet, that once again helps provide a context. There's also the FY12 budget goals included there, which the school committee developed during the month of September. And then there's some new information in this flap that I wanted to pause and emphasize a little bit. The budget for many years was a function of the town meeting appropriation. Whatever dollars town meeting appropriated to the school department was the primary source of funds for us to develop our operations. But in recent years, the general appropriation has been supplemented by many other sources of funds, namely grants, revolving accounts. So in an effort to be as transparent as possible in this budget process, we've included in this budget presentation a great deal of detail. In fact, 3 years of detail on our revolving funds, on our grants, and we've even included descriptions and definitions of each and every revolving account and every grant. And while there's been no request for us to do this, I think we might as well err on the side of transparency and be as transparent as we can and allow the public to understand that where their user fees go and how that assists us in balancing our budget and moving forward.
Carl, can I just ask you one question? So all this money here, the revolving accounts, grants, et cetera, is above and beyond what we request from the town appropriation. So if you add the town appropriation to this number, that's essentially our budget for fiscal year 2012, correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to understand, because I was trying to make sense of that, and
Mhm.
appreciate it, thanks.
And I'm more than happy to work with the finance committee or any other groups who want further clarification, but as I said, this is an initiative we've taken ourselves to attempt to better explain all of the funds. It makes our budget process a heck of a lot more complicated, to be honest with you, because we're in the midst of always trying to estimate revenues and how we can best use them. But we've included all this information as a way to try to clarify the process. So, as we begin to discuss the budget, get my notes here. You know, I think it's important to use your goals as your starting point as you develop a budget. And so many times, budgets are a reflection of a vision, of a discussion amongst many different disparate parties as they try to develop what kind of school system you want to operate. Yet I think in these economic times, it's important to say at the outset that this budget that we're presenting to the school committee tonight, in effect, is a placeholder. We felt it inappropriate to discuss all of our aspirations and visions that we have in the years ahead at this stage in the process. Having said that, I believe the superintendent later tonight is going to share with the group what we're hoping to see in the years to come. But the actual detailed budget that we're looking at for FY12 at this stage is primarily a modified level services budget. So as you start to put a budget together, you have to develop priorities. And I think it's fair to say that our primary priority as we exercise our budget is to focus on personnel. For several years now, we have worked very hard to make sure our personnel levels were at least the same as the previous year, if not better. And in order to do that, we have been increasingly taking money out of the non-personnel side of the budget because of the priorities that we're describing here. In other words, it's teachers in the classroom that we really are focusing on, and frankly, at some expense, that expense being the school budgets and the fixed costs and many other things. So what is a modified level services budget? Excuse me. We begin with attempting to replicate the same level of services that you see this present year. So what we do is we examine our personnel, we examine our budgets, and we basically, how can we replicate the FY11 experience onto FY12? The only adjustments we make are for known increases and decreases in our fixed costs areas, such as special education and such as transportation, and in some cases collective bargaining contracts. So if you are aware of a specific increase or decrease, we plug that in. This is jumping way ahead of me here, excuse me. So let's break down the various aspects of what modified level services are. There are really 4 segments of the budget, and by far the largest segment is personnel. And personnel, of course, is our employees. So, as I said earlier, this budget replicates this year's FTE. That's our acronym for full-time equivalent. It's not unusual for us to have one teacher who might be teaching a half load, so they're considered a 0.5 employee. 2 of them make or comprise 1.0. So we use the FTE as we do this. Even though the FTE in this budget is the same as FY11, it's probable that in many cases there'll be some reassignments that might be made internally that are a recognition of shifting needs, such as enrollment shifts and things of that nature. And as this process unfolds, the superintendent will describe those. The second of 4 areas of the budget are the so-called school budgets. Each of the schools has a budget, and then some of the system-wide departments have a budget, those being academic services and people personnel services. So the school budgets, what are they? They comprise the individual school ability to purchase consumables such as paper, ink cartridges, things like that, the professional development that takes place at the school level, as well as any instructional technology investments that are made at the school level. It's interesting to note that the budget that you are looking at, even though it's FY12, the budget allocations by school and department are approximately at the FY04 level. We've said that before, and if you remember my earlier remarks, what we've been trying to do is maintain our employees. So by maintaining our personnel levels, you have to take it from somewhere, and what we have been doing over these years is taking it out of the individual school budgets. And of course, that has meant that in many cases, the schools individually become increasingly dependent upon contributions and fundraising that they do from parents. The third section of 4 of the budget are the fixed costs. Fixed costs are primarily utilities, the cost of heating the building, the network infrastructure that powers our technology. We have level funded those once again this year. And once again, in order to do that, there are continual attempts to try to save costs, whether it's refillable ink cartridges, whether it's tweaking thermostat down a little bit. The economic times have meant that we've had to be very aggressive in finding ways to reduce costs. And the 4th area within this modified level services budget is special education. And you might, in a way, call this a fixed cost because you're really driven by the individual education plans, or the IEPs, that govern the resources and programs that are delivered to students. People sometimes forget that special education is much more than tuition. It's also the transportation that we fund, as well as the services that we provide, in many cases, to students who are in resident here in North Reading schools. Special education is much more than those students who are outplaced in private placements. There are approximately 35 of those students, but there are also approximately 375 other students who are here in North Reading. And this section of the budget, by the way, tends to increase faster than any other section of the budget. So once again, it's a challenge when you're living within a level services environment. So let's start to look at the budget with a little more detail. When you look at this budget request, it's no different from previous years. Personnel comprise 81% of the budget. So once again, I think that's an illustrative way of showing you that when you're trying to maintain that personnel at that level, you keep cutting into expenses. And it makes